And good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. It depends where you are around the globe. And first of all, thank you to this webinar organizer for opportunity to present. I've just learned so far nobody presented from Australia or New Zealand. It sounds like I am the first person. So it's very exciting. And thank you all attendees to attend this webinar. And today, the topics of today's presentation is using R machine learning script as a Power BI data source. So the Power BI is a new addition to a stack of business intelligence tools, and it has very many great features, and my favorite probably would be Power Query Engine and data modeling and custom visuals, publishing to the cloud, and integration with R, of course. We will be talking about it today. I probably should also mention natural language search, as well as impressive speed of Power BI updates. It's monthly for Power BI desktop and weekly for Power BI services and custom visuals. Just like to remind you, the R language for statistical is a language for statistical and machine learning programming. It was developed in New Zealand by two people, Ross Ihaka and Robert Gentleman in Auckland University about 23 years ago, and it was influenced by the implementation of S language. It was done by John Chambers at Bell Labs, who is actually also a member of the R development team. And of course, you know probably what machine learning is. It is a type of artificial intelligence that provides computers with an ability to learn from experience and without being explicitly programmed. Okay, so, and can you see the second screen?
Yeah, I can. It says what do we demo?
Yeah.
All right.
Our goal today is to develop a dashboard, which is shown on the left, which categorizes US states based on certain attributes of quality of living. And in terms of what is the best states for retirement, it allows also to compare two or more clusters. It will categorize them into clusters, and we compare clusters with each other. We can visualize clusters on the map, and also display a centroid of every cluster. So how do we do it? So first of all, we will develop an R script in R Studio, which is one of the popular IDE for R. So, and R will connect to two data sources, which is HTML tables located in two different websites. We will scrap the HTML tables, and then we will test R script. And when it is ready to be plugged in, we plug in into Power BI, and we will build the dashboard. And if we need, we can share this dashboard with our colleague and publish it to the cloud. So just briefly to mention those two data sources we are going to connect to on the internet. One is shown on the left, the first table, and the second on the right. The second table we need only for geocoding, and we will be using the first column to link to the table on the left, the main table, and we need the fourth column, which is ANSI codes of the United States in order to do the geocoding. So this webinar is based on my recent publication, and you can see the link at the top of the screen. It is published in Simple Talk magazine. You can have a look and you can learn how it was done. And also, if you want to follow along that script, you can also download the software, the bottom three links at the top, which is Power BI, R, and R Studio. Okay, now it is just time to demo. But before we demonstrate how to build the R script, I'd like to show you the end product that Power BI dashboard we are going to build. So it's on the screen now. As you can see, at the top corner of the dashboard, one control is grayed out. So because it's not the main control of Power BI, it is a custom developed by third party. In order to view it, we have to enable and click on Enable Custom Visuals. So on the top left corner there is a slicer, and it does what it says. It filters the content. If I click, for example, on the cluster number 2, it will show on the cluster number 2. If I want to go back, I clear the selection by clicking on the eraser. Under the slicer we have a table of centroids. So centroids is practically, if we represent every element of the cluster as a dot, centroids will be a point somewhere in the middle of the cluster, whereas all elements of the cluster, an average distance will be close, similar to other elements. At the bottom we have a table which shows a cluster which the states belong to, and all the variables, which is crime rate, healthcare quality, living cost, tax, weather, and well-being. In the top right corner we will have a medians of every variable, median of crime rate, median of healthcare, and so on, displayed on the table heat map. And on the horizontal axis we have a number of clusters, about 7 clusters. We also can display every cluster on the map at the bottom right corner. So if I click, for example, on cluster number 5, it will display only one cluster on the table. So earlier I mentioned the custom visuals. The custom visuals, one of them is already on the screen, and it's called table heat map. But if I want to use another cluster, I can go to a website which is called Visual Gallery. It should pop up in a minute. And this is a URL, app.powerbi.com/visuals, and this is where you can download all these custom visuals, and some of them I will demo today. They're quite nice and very functional, very useful. So when you download it, then you can put it on the disk somewhere, and you can replace. If I want to replace, for example, this cluster with another one, this visual with another custom visuals, I can click on these several dots here on the visuals toolbar and import visuals into Power BI. Let's say I want to import force graph. So the new icon appears on the screen. And if I want to replace table heat map with the force graph, I can just click on it and then zoom in into our data sources and drag Okay, so what it displays connection between the clusters. Let me make it bigger. Display connection between the clusters in every state, and the line corresponds to the strength of the connection. In this case, it is a median of the crime rate. So we can make it a little bit better if we, for example, put the arrows and change the color of every line connected to clusters and state based on weight. So you can see that clusters have a different strength of connections. I can move it around. Can you see it okay?
Yeah, I can. Sergey, there's a question. Do you want to answer that right now?
Yeah, of course.
So the visual that we are seeing, RT asks, is this about R as the data source? So in other words, is this custom visual using the R code?
In this case, yes, because I built the data source using R, and we will go to this in a minute. So whenever whenever the data is uploaded, either using R or SQL or any other language, it becomes available as a data set on the right-hand side of the screen. Okay, I will go to this in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so back to our dashboard, and this is actually, and let me demonstrate you another visual control. Like Tornado chart, for example. Tornado is quite nice to compare two clusters between each other. If I replace it and put state as a group, state as a group, and a cluster as a legend, and then I will use so let's go back to our dashboard. I will explain you how the dashboard was built. So now in order to build this data sources on the right hand side, which is called dataset and methods, we use RStudio, and this is R code which I developed in order to build this dashboard. I grouped the statement into several blocks in order to make explanation a bit easier. So the block 1, it's practically list all the libraries which we are using to build the dashboard and to write the code. This is a definition of the function which convert factors to numeric, textual variables into numeric, and the first group of statement practically defines the URL. This is our data sources, HTML tables, and the first location and the second location. The second block of the code connects to the first URL, finds the table on that page, extracts the table, and remove and transform some variables, like for example healthcare quality variable. It's not a numeric, it has a suffix which is highlighted on my screen, so I have to remove the suffix, and this is what the statement does. It cuts off the tail and save it into the same variable. So the block number 3 does the same for the second table. I connect to the second URL. The second URL, second HTML table is a little bit more complex than the first one and has a header of the tables with several rows. So I have to remove these unwanted rows and unwanted columns. Then I will rename the remaining columns and give the name state and a state code. And then I join the second table to the first using this R merge tables, and I'm using the first column state in order to join in both tables. Then I will reshuffle the order of the columns in the final data set. So 7 column becomes the first, and all columns remain the same position. Rename all columns, and then column 2 and 7 I will convert them into numbers. And finally, we are going to the place where we'll do the machine learning, partitioning our data set into clusters. So we can use two algorithms here. If cluster method is 1, then we can use the first algorithm, which is the PAMK, which stands for partitioning around midoids. Midoids is the center of the clusters. So then when clusters is created, I will go to the cluster object and get the cluster vector and put it into a data source, which is named dataset, in order to visualize it. Then this statement calculates the centroids of every cluster. I also change the position of the column, rename the orders, change the orders, and sort the final data set by state. Then I add number of clusters to the centroids and also reorder the columns. Column number 7 becomes the first column. And we are ready to test it. To test it, I highlight the whole script and run it. So it connects to HTML tables, extract 2 tables, transform them, join them together into one source, calculates the clusters and centroids, and ready to pass it to Power BI. Before we pass it, I'd like to make sure that we extracted the information. So to do that in the console, I just type midoids, and I can see that we extracted 2 clusters, and the centroid of those clusters displayed on the screen. So what's happened? We've had 7 clusters before when I demonstrated the dashboard, and now there is only 2 clusters extracted. What's happened, and when I did it first time a couple of months ago and published the article, the survey was a previous year survey published in Bankrate, and recently, about 2-3 weeks ago, they changed the data set on the website and published the very recent survey. For that survey, there is only 2 clusters available. But it probably makes it even interesting because it's a live situation. So now we have to grab the code we just tested. I copy it into the clipboard and open Power BI, desktop, and create a new dashboard. So when welcome screen appears on the screen, I select Get Data, and then on the Get Data screen, click on Others, and on the right-hand side, it is a data set called R script. Highlight the R script and click Connect, paste the R script we just developed, and click OK. So the code gets executed. And in a minute we will see the results. Yes, there is 2 data frames or 2 tables for simplicity. One table called midoids, which is a cluster centroids, and another one is the main table, which lists all the cluster and states and the variables. When I'm ready, I click the load. See that both data frames loaded, and you can see them on the left-hand side of the screen in the panel called Fields. So what we do now, we join these two data frames together. So you see by default, for some reason, Power BI selected living cost in both tables in order to link tables together. So we need to join them based on clusters. Hello?
Yeah. Hey, Sergei, there are a few questions. Do you want to go through them right now?
Yeah, of course.
So the first one is, what is a cluster?
And I guess the data cluster is a collection of objects which are similar to each other. What the machine learning algorithm does, it scans all the 50 records and identifies those records which is close to each other. Close means a distance between the centroid of the cluster and its neighbors are similar. So then it finds maybe 2, 3 or more clusters which is similar. Similar means the distance between centroids and neighboring elements about the same. So it does several iterations in order to find the optimum location of the centroids and the surrounding members, and this is how the cluster is built. Any other questions?
Yeah, perfect. So next one is from Jim. He says, how did you tell Power BI where the R engine was installed?
And first of all, you need to install the R. It can be Microsoft R Open distribution or open source R. And when you install the Power BI, usually it detects the location of the R installation. If not, there is a property in R. Probably you can saw it briefly when I connected to the script. It shows that location on my disk, but probably it was too fast and he didn't notice it. But it is reasonably easy. You just change the path and that's it. It's very easy.
Perfect. So the next one is, will all of the packages that are available on CRAN will be available on the dashboard published to Power BI? If not, is there a list that Microsoft will maintain that is the list of packages that are supported?
When I developed this application first and a couple of months ago and published my article, which was referenced in one of the slides, I used just OpenR, and then there was no problem in developing. But later on, because I was very interested to experiment with SQL 2016, which has this embedded R analytics inside the server. But SQL Server requires and Microsoft R Open distribution. So I removed the R from my machine and installed Microsoft R Open. And on the later development, I was done using Microsoft R Open. And so far, I haven't found any problem. It works just fine.
Okay, perfect. There's one more. Do you want to keep going, or do you want to answer the questions?
I can answer the question, no problem.
Okay. So the other one is, can you read RDF with R?
What is RDF?
Let me follow up with the person who asked the question. The other one is, where did the machine learning occur?
It depends on your installation. And in this case, the server and the clients is on one machine in my laptop, so it calculates on the client. But if you install it, for example, in the cloud, and you do development in Power BI in the cloud, you can connect to the R server, probably on Azure as well. So it's reasonably flexible. It can be on the server or on the client, on your machine or on two machines. So it depends. It depends what works for you.
Okay, perfect. I think we can keep going, and I'll keep an eye out on other questions that might pop up.
Just quickly to recap, in order to go back where we were. So what I did, I executed the R script. When R script executed, we downloaded two datasets. One is named dataset and another is named middoids. Then I joined two datasets on a cluster field. And then we are ready to build the dashboard, which I previously demonstrated to you. But in this case, it will be only two clusters. So as you remember, the first object will be a control will be a slicer. So I just click on that first left icon on the last row in the visualization tab. And then I grab the cluster and put it into a field. And resize the cluster and change the layout into horizontal rather than vertical, just to save the real estate. So the slicer is ready. Next I grab the table to create the middoid. Sorry. The Power BI works if control is active and you click on another icon, it just replaces the existing one. This is what happened. So this is a table, and I click on middoids. So all middoids are pulled out, and we don't need total. So I go to the properties and turn off the totals. Okay. First table is ready, and we need to get the detailed tables with all states and clusters listed. And as with centroids, we don't need the total. It don't make too much sense here. So I turn the totals off. And if font is too small, you can increase the font slightly. Okay. And now we can create the custom visuals. So currently I don't have any custom visuals in the visualization tab. I will download, or already downloaded, I will just import. But because we have only two clusters, the table heat map doesn't make too much sense. I just import Tornado chat. And we need a state and a cluster, and let's say well-being. So in this way you can compare two clusters between each other. You can pull out another variable, how the clusters compares on the crime rate or weather, and so on. And the final, we need a map. To do map, we just click on state, and Power BI immediately recognizes the codes of the states and uses appropriate control in order to visualize it. So you can see all 50 states displayed. And also I need a cluster and one of the variables like a crime rate, for instance. And there is another map control in visuals, which is probably more suitable. I just click on first icon in the fourth row, which is called field map. And now I can see the map on the screen. There is a tooltip which allows to see the data associated with every state. And this is practically it. In spite of the simplicity of this development, I think I took you through all the typical steps connecting to the off-premises data sources, downloading them, joining them between each other, transforming the variables, enhancing the data set using machine learning, and created the dashboard. It's a typical workflow or typical cycle in BI or data science, and this is what you can do with Power BI and R. And in my life, through this like 20 years of BI and data science, I was using different BI tools, and I was always interested in order to connect to the R from different BI sources, BI applications. It was quite a challenging task. With Power BI, it is quite easy to do, as you saw it yourself. So it's quite powerful. So if you have any more questions, I would be happy to answer.
All right, awesome. We have a few questions. So the first one is, in the R code used in the script box in Power BI, can you benefit from the R and the SQL Server integration? For example, the Revolution package that was released, can you change the execution context to SQL Server? This was by RT.
Absolutely, and this is what I do practically in my day-to-day life. I use the R and Rs and SQL, maybe some other packages as well, like Python. So SQL, you can use, for example, SQL and R together. You can create one data source using just SQL, connect it to any database like Postgres or SQL Server or any other, or on the cloud. And you can use R code in order to connect to another data source, and you can join them together if there is a common field, or you can make a common field by transform two fields or more fields in both data sets and join them together. It's very beneficial to use different languages.
All right, awesome. So there are a couple of questions around the R code and where you can download them. So on the handout sections, you can go and download it. If not, there's also a link that I posted in the chat section. So feel free to find that. You should be able to get to the R code. If not, please ping me again and I'm happy to share that. There's other questions around will this be available later on? Yes, so we have a YouTube channel, so we'll get this recording posted there. Let's see, other questions. Yeah, so the other question from Ryan, he asks, do we have this deployed to powerbi.com?
Sorry, could you say it again? I missed the first couple of words.
Sure, definitely. So he asks, do you have this deployed on powerbi.com?
Deployed?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
So I guess what the person is asking is, did you manage to deploy this dashboard on the Power BI cloud?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's probably quite important. Probably quite important to show it how it can be done. So when dashboard is, let's grab the previous version of the dashboard, which is a little bit more sexy. So when dashboard is ready, you can pull out the ribbon and you can see the last button here called Publish. You can click on the Publish, and if you have a Power BI Azure account, you can publish it to the cloud. And when you do it, and for example, currently it's asked me, do you want to replace? I said, okay, replace, because I already published it. It grabs the file, which is extension, Power BI extension, and provide you immediately with URL. To the cloud. So it launches the Power BI in the cloud. And this is just what I published. Can you see it okay?
Yeah, perfect. All right.
Okay.
So to follow up,
and you can keep developing. For example, this is my dashboard, and this is my data sources, and you can use these data sources in order to maybe join them together or add more columns or create another controls. You can look in the fields in the data sources, like for example, if you pull out another data source, you can see the fields. So it's practically the same environment as desktop, and you can do pretty much the same as a desktop environment.
all right, perfect. So to follow up on that, there's a couple of people who had the same question. So they asked, are you able to execute the R script on refreshes? So in other words, can you automate the data refresh cycle on the Power BI?
Yes, there is another application which is called Power BI Gateway. So if, for example, let's say the architecture, you have a desktop on your machine, you have an R server somewhere on the premises on another machine, maybe on Unix or Linux installed, and they have the cloud. So you develop the Power BI dashboard and you publish it, but you would like to refresh it. In order to refresh, you download from Microsoft website an application called Power BI Gateway, and you connect the source and the destination, and you schedule the updates. So it will update your either the database, will connect to database, update it and refresh the cloud, or you can refresh the R script as well. So it will re-execute the script and refresh the Power BI dashboard. Going back to that scenario which I showed you, the dashboard which was developed about 2 months ago with 7 clusters, and later on the hosting company ran another survey and published the new data, and instead of 7 clusters it's only 2, and when you refresh it, all your users will see the new results of the survey with 2 clusters only.
Yeah, awesome. So the next question is, where did you get the imported visualizations?
Okay, I will take you back to that website which I briefly showed in the beginning of the webinar. So the URL is app.powerbi.com/visuals. This is where you download the third-party visualization controls.
Perfect. And I've posted that in the chat box in case you didn't capture it. Let's see, the next question is it possible to use the plotting functions in R to display these plots in Power BI?
Yes, it is possible. I'll just take you back to Power BI. You see, in the latest editions of Power BI, in the later version, you have to download the very latest one. On the last row of the visualization, there is an icon which is called R. You see the tooltip says R script visuals. What does it mean? Which means if your script returns not only the data frame but also an image, these visuals can be displayed in Power BI. So you can use R visuals as well.
Okay, perfect. There's a few more questions, so do you want to still keep going?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. So the next one is, what's the best way to clean or format the data in Power BI? Is it better to pass it to R for the ML work and then bring it back to Power BI for visualization?
It's I would like to say it's on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes I do all the cleaning on the server using SQL. Sometimes I do it in R. It depends on the effort and your familiarity with the language and the environment. Some people are very skilled in SQL and they can do the cleaning very quickly. Some people use even SSIS in order to transfer one source into another and clean it on the way. And some people do entire work in R. So it depends on your preferences.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so the next question is the web the only way to publish these dashboards, or can you deploy these dashboards on an on-premise host like SharePoint or something else?
I haven't experimented with SharePoint yet, but Microsoft is entirely focusing on Azure. Currently there is no option to have on-premise server with Power BI available, but I think Microsoft probably will make it available in the future. We had some discussion with the local branch and they are thinking about it. I'm not sure when it might happen or will happen, but they are aware of the necessity to have on-premises Power BI servers.
Okay.
Currently it's only Azure. When you publish it goes to Azure.
All right, perfect. So the other question is the cluster method computing centroids built into the Power BI, or is this a separate tool?
No, it's all done in R. The R is engine which does the machine learning. And I would like to re-emphasize the importance of this because the Power BI doesn't have this power to do the machine learning, where the R has all sort of algorithm. It has a predictive analytics. You can process the time series and do the forecasting. You can do the segmentation. You can do clustering. You can do logistic regression. You can do all, whatever you dream, there is a package on R which does the job.
All right, perfect. So on that note, there's another question. So how does this tool compare to other tools that you might have used, things like MATLAB or SAS?
I can only say what Google says. I did some Google Trend analysis, if you are familiar which Google Trends is. So what Google Trends shows us is a rapid decline of SAS and the very fast growing of R. And probably because of the R is open source, it practically costs nothing. You can download and start developing in about half an hour, whereas the SAS is a modularized, very sophisticated application. It has all the power which R has, but in order to have it, you have to buy all the necessary modules. It's quite expensive. Compared to other BI tools, currently Power BI quite similar to Tableau. There are some things which Power BI does better than Tableau, and there are other things which Tableau does better, but they are going neck and neck. But keep it in mind, Microsoft has nearly thousands of developers working on Power BI. They put a lot of effort in order to lead this, and they're quite successful. Power BI was unknown about 6 months ago, and now it is one of the leading BI tools.
Okay, perfect. Question from James. He asked, the R packages you want to use must be self-contained. That is, the R library can't be reached out to the internet dynamically. So,
yes, as I mentioned before, I was working on R integration with different platforms in the past. I did it manually myself, and it is a very challenging task because you want to connect it to the web, and you need a special web server which is able to connect to the R engine. So, and as I said before, the R Power BI does it quite nicely. So I don't know how they implemented it, but it works very well. There are some other tools which allow us to connect R to the web, and one of them is called Open CPU. which is developed in UCLA, one of the PhD students, Jerome Ohms, which is quite nice too, but it's not supported by a company, it's just one-man development. And some other BI tools using this interface, like for example ClickView or ClickSense, they use OpenCPU in order to connect to R. Tableau is able to connect to R, but not as nice and flexible as Power BI does it.
Okay, perfect. There's one more question. Can you combine the R visuals and R code features in Power BI to use Power BI resident data to start with, push to R,
Yes,
process and return to Power BI?
Yes, thank you. Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. There's the other question, which is, can you compare the Azure ML Studio to what you have done here?
Sorry, could you repeat again?
Yeah, so the Steve, he basically is asking, can you compare this, what you just did up with R and Power BI, with Azure Machine Learning Studio?
It's yeah, probably you can compare. So, and again, when you do it in Machine Learning Studio, it is a very nice environment. It's like a Visio. There is a canvas. You can grab a shape or widget, put it in the canvas, connect it to another canvas, and create a workflow which does data science or BI application. And when it is ready, you can publish it as a web service, which is a very nice option. I did recently demonstration to my team in my company, and it was jaw-dropping effect. So you create a data science application and publish as a web server, then you open Excel and put some data in a worksheet in Excel and send it to the through the web service, through the RESTful API, to machine learning, and it returns the predictions to Excel. So it's very impressive.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. So next question, do you have a feel for how practical is it to work with Python these days, considering that Microsoft is supporting R?
Microsoft supporting Python as well, and actually that's Jupyter Notebook, which is practically IDI for Python, and now also support R. You can open Jupyter Notebook and R code. I think there are some people prefer Python, some people prefer R. In our company, we have I think 5 or 6 data scientists, 2 of them using Python and 4 of them using just R. It's practically the same power. It's nice to have the both languages and to be skilled in both languages, but it's rare. Some people are very skilled in Python, some people are very skilled in R.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks for answering all those questions. Really appreciate it. I think that's all the questions that we have for now. I just want to remind everyone that after if you have any other question, feel free to reach out to us via Twitter or our email, which is pavc@sqlpass.org. Sergei, any last minute words that you might have for the attendees?
Just I would like you to encourage to experiment with Power BI and R. I was very excited when I discovered Power BI and the way how it is integrated with R, and like to mention again that Microsoft has a very rapid cycle of deployment of new versions. Desktop is every month they publish a new version, and the Power BI servers and custom visuals every 2 weeks you can see the new elements on the website. It's a very exciting tool, very flexible. But somebody asked a question about Azure Machine Learning Studio. It's a very nice tool as well, so I encourage you to experiment and use it in your work.
Right.
And thank you again, the organizers, to give me an opportunity to present, and all attendees for attending the seminar. Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks everyone. Thanks for attending, and thanks Sergei for sharing this with the community. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Once you log out, there will be a survey, so we'll really appreciate it if you can fill up the survey. The feedback will go to us as well as we'll pass it to the speaker as well. Thank you again. Thanks.
Thank you.